Okay, let's talk about these poems and these questions. Number one, what is the woman thing? It's the title of the poem, but it's very unclear. So let's see if we can figure this out together. Two groups took this question, and we got there eventually, but you have to read the whole poem to understand because it says meanwhile, which means at the same time, which means everything above that is going on is related to the woman thing. So we have to look at the whole poem. So what does the poem say? The hunters are back from beating the winter's face in search of a challenge or task in search of food. Okay, so already things are kind of strange. Hunters are supposed to hunt food. That's okay. But what about line two? In search of a challenge or task. So they're not just treating it as a job, they're also treating it as a sense of achievement. It's a chance to test themselves. But doing this makes fresh tracks for children's hunger. And later on, we'll see that they return empty handed. So it's kind of showing us that by prioritizing their own testing and sense of achievement, they are putting their families at risk. Because if it's a test, if it's a real test, you could fail. But in this case, if you fail, you don't have food. So it's kind of saying these male hunters are putting their own ego before the uh, safety and food for their family. And so this kind of attitude is making fresh tracks for their children's hunger. Yes, they go around walking around finding challenges, but what they're really doing is they're making their children go hungry. They do not watch the sun. They cannot wear its heat for a sign of triumph or freedom. So yes, again, it's tied to failure, right? They don't watch the sun. They don't pay attention to the time. They don't think about the family they have left at home. And yet, despite spending all this time, they fail. So they don't even have triumph or freedom. The hunters are treading heavily homeward, heavily, which means disappointed, through snow that is marked with their own bloody footprints. All they have to show for themselves is themselves. That's all they have. Empty handed, the hunters return, snow maddened, sustained by their rages. So they know they have failed and they're angry about it. But this anger is aggravated by the snow. Have you guys ever visited a place where it's covered in white snow and in the broad daylight, it hurts your eyes? The sun reflects off of the white snow and you can go blind from looking at snow. So being snow maddened is to kind of go crazy because you can't handle all of this bright light. So here it's a kind of pun. Mad means crazy, but mad also means angry. Anyway, the whole situation makes these hunters very angry. In the night after food, whatever food they have at home, they may seek young girls for their amusement. And of course, everybody who took this question noticed it is young girls, it is not young women. So already you have an unfair sexual situation. But now the hunters are coming and the unbaked girls flee from their angers. So usually if they have food, they would already go and like find these young girls. But now they don't even have food and they're angry. And so these girls who are unbaked means not ready, right? Bread that has not been baked is not ready to be eaten. So these girls are really too young. Flee from their angers. So it's like these men are taking out their anger on the girls, on other people. All this day I have craved food for my child's hunger. Empty-handed the hunters come shouting, injustices drip from their mouths. So they're angry, but they're not taking responsibility for their own failure. They're blaming other people, they're blaming the weather, they're blaming God, whatever. Injustices. It's not fair, these men are saying. They're complaining. And you'll remember, as the men are complaining about how it's not fair, it's not their fault, their families are starving. And the injustices drip from their mouths like stale snow melted in sunlight. So technically speaking, this image is not related to the previous line. It's to introduce the next image. So remember this, snow melting in sunlight. We're going to use this image a little later. Meanwhile, at the same time, while all of this is going on, the woman thing my mother taught me bakes off its covering of snow. So just like the previous image, the woman thing is slowly, the snow on top of the woman thing is melting. The woman thing is appearing like a rising, blackening sun. And it's compared to not just a sun, not just a rising sun, like a sun that grows brighter and more powerful. It's a blackening sun, which means that this sun blackens or burns everything that it touches. So, and of course, there's a pun also because the poet Audre Lorde is also a black woman. So it's also a symbol of the source of this power coming from her black mother and her own black self. It's kind of like it's you can say blackening means that it burns whatever it touches. You can also say that these burns are an imprint, 烙印, of the source of that power. So if we remember what's going on here, right? Failures of men can't keep their families alive, put their own ego in front of the health and safety of their family, come back and start complaining, come to start abusing these young girls, taking out their anger on the girls and women. It's incredibly unfair. It's not just patriarchal, it's also incredibly unfair. So as all of this is happening, a source of power is rising that would burn and imprint everything it touches. And this source of power is passed down from mother to daughter. So the woman thing could be a source of female resistance. It could be a source of uh, recovering justice. It could be a source of hope and strength. It could be a source of righteous anger or righteous fury. Whatever you want to call it, I think you can understand what it is. It's the thing that, in the face of an unfair society and unfair situations, it's what keeps these women sane and hopeful and willing to continue to fight on and survive. So the idea that it's passed down from mother to daughter is power to the poem because the story is really prehistorical societies, right? Hunters and gatherers. But if already back then the source of female power has been passed down for generations, this seems to be saying that most, if not all, of human history is patriarchal, that women have mostly been in the weaker position, and that they have needed to pass down from mother to daughter the source of this resistance and power and righteous fury. It's like a secret power that has to be passed down because society doesn't recognize it. It doesn't allow it to exist. But of course, this is not history, right? This is a poem. This is imagery, and so perhaps the poem was written with such a sense of history because that could add to the the power of its central message. Uh, it's kind of like saying to a woman reader, you feel like life is unfair now. You feel like society is not for you. You feel like it's all unjust. But you're not the first generation to feel this. Women throughout human history have felt this. And yet we women have survived. We have taught each other how to fight back. Uh, so, don't lose hope. If we have survived for so many generations, you will also survive. And that's why it doesn't have a name. It's called the one thing. Because, if society is patriarchal, if men are in control of the power and the ideas and the way that society thinks about women, then of course the society would not have a name for this. This is something that in the poem, this is something that women use for protecting and helping women. So a society of men, of course, would not have a name for it. That's why it's called the woman thing. Questions? Okay. So again, right, this is a poem. It's supposed to inspire. I think it's supposed to inspire to give hope. It's not necessarily an accurate picture of human history. Although I'm sure it's not that inaccurate either. Okay, question 2. In Black Mother Woman, why do you think the speaker's mother is so angry? Two groups took this question. Um, so let's take a closer look. This is a poem full of very interesting contradictions. So let's see if we can make it make sense. I cannot recall you gentle, yet through your heavy love, I have become an image of your once delicate flesh, split with deceitful longings. So we can assume that the speaker is talking to her mother. The addressee is her mother. So it's saying like, I can't remember a time when you were gentle. You were always very heavy-handed and maybe rough uh, when taking care of me. But at this point, I have become an image of you. I have become like you, or when I have become a symbol of you. There is an intimate connection between us. But it's not just you, it's one specific part of you. Your once delicate flesh split with deceitful longings. In uh, easier to understand English, this is your once delicate body that has been opened up because of dishonest desire. 这样也比较简单嘛. Uh, okay, so in Chinese, 曾经精致的身体，现在因为欺骗的欲望而裂开。So to me, this is talking about um, a specific kind of sexual desire or sexual encounter where the other person was not faithful or maybe did not stay. Maybe um, there was an expectation and the other person did not keep those expectations. And if we keep reading the poem, I think one interpretation that would make sense is if the speaker's mother is a single mother and that the speaker herself was born without when her parents were never married. In English, we call this being born out of wedlock, 婚外生女, or 生子, in this case, 生女. So that could explain why her mother was never that kind of gentle, kind mother. We would need more details to understand exactly why. So let's keep reading. When strangers come and compliment me, your aged spirit takes a bow, jingling with pride. Aged means old. So we're talking about now. when the speaker has grown up and her mother has grown old. So now when people compliment me, you are proud of me. But once in the past, you hid that secret in the center of furies, hanging me with deep breasts and wiry hair, with your own split flesh and long-suffering eyes buried in myths of little worth. Okay, so before you hid the secret. Now, if the secret is the fact that even though her mother's single, she had a daughter, then that would make her daughter, the speaker, the secret. So when it says you hid that secret, it means you hid me. You didn't want people to realize that you had a daughter. Okay, but where did you hide me or the secret? In the center of furies, in the middle of anger. So kind of like every time you thought of me or somebody mentioned me, it made you angry all over again. Hanging me with deep breasts and wiry hair. Okay, so wiry hair is a common feature of Black people. Like their hair is their natural hair structure is usually not straight. It's usually not big curls. It's very tiny curls like wires. Now, deep breasts is not a scientifically, statistically common feature of Black women. This is more related to a racist stereotype of Black women. Um, the racist stereotype of Black people is that they are less civilized, more primitive, and so they used to often be described as more like animals, like monkeys, or belonging in nature and not society. And so the idea of having large breasts or like more obvious and primitive body structures is related to that stereotype. So the key point here is that her mother's fury and uh, sense of shame, we're going to get to that in a few lines, is related to these racial stereotypes. So it's telling us that these negative feelings are coming from the society around her. She feels this way because society makes her feel this way. So continuing with the poem, you, mother, hide the secret, hide me, together with these racist stereotypes and characteristics related to our race. You hide me together with the fact that your flesh is no longer whole, which means you have had sex. You hide me with your long-suffering eyes, buried in myths of little worth. And I think this line is saying that her mother feels that she herself is worthless. She does not have the self-confidence or self-esteem. So these four lines are connecting all of these central images and telling us that they go together, whether it is racist stereotypes, uh, moral judgments about people's private sex lives, how these ideas make her mother suffer for so many years and make her mother feel like she is worthless. But remember, this is all in the past, right? Now her mother is proud of her. So somewhere along the line, her mother realized that this is not true. These are simply ideas that society have convinced her to believe, but they're not what she herself believes. She doesn't have to feel ashamed of her race or the fact that she has a daughter out of wedlock. And maybe that is the source of her anger. The fact that she was made to suffer for so long because of ideas that she herself does not believe. So if we continue, but I have peeled away your anger down to the core of love. So the speaker is saying, I have learned that underneath your anger, underneath your rough treatment of me, like the fact that you raised me in a less than gentle way, that you still love me. And look, mother, I am. It's capitalized, right? Capital A. Am means to exist. I exist. I'm still here. I am a complete and whole person. I have grown up into a complete person. A dark temple where your true spirit rises beautiful and tough as chestnut. So I am a reflection of your true spirit, not the you that society wants to convince you are, the true you. And the true spirit, your true spirit, is beautiful and tough. And you can see that when you look at me, right? Previously, the speaker was a symbol of her mother's shame, but now she has become a symbol of her mother's pride. And so I have become, next line, stanchion against your nightmare of weakness. When you look at me, you are reminded again that it's not your problem, it's society's problem. And if my eyes conceal a squadron of conflicting rebellions, so yes, when you look at me, you find this strength in me, you see me as the good parts of you. But behind my eyes, if in my mind I still have these conflicts, I learned from you to define myself through your denials. So even when I myself have these mental conflicts, I have learned from you that the point isn't to avoid suffering. The point isn't to um, pretend like those problems don't exist. The point is to reject those problems, to see them for what they are, and to say, that is not how I define myself. That is not what I believe. To define myself through your denials, the way that you denied society's values. That's how I define myself as well. So if you really think about it, what this poem is saying is, uh, you gave me a contradictory childhood, but because of the love that you still had for me, right, down to the core of love, or even if you go back to the top, it says your heavy love. So even in this contradictory childhood, because you still love me and you always love me, I have learned from you how to deal with the same contradictions that society is trying to impose on me. By watching your struggle and learning about your struggle, I have learned how to deal with my own struggle. So, in fact, this could be a very good example of one version of the woman thing, something passed down from mother to daughter that helps them survive in the society that is not supportive of them. So once again, you see why the woman thing is called the woman thing, because it's really hard to explain. It takes a whole poem to even approach the uh, central aspects of this idea. This is what her mother has taught her, and how her mother has helped the speaker become a stronger and more complete woman, Black woman. So back to the original question, why is the speaker's mother so angry? Maybe it's because she realized that all of those negative feelings about her daughter and herself were not justified. They were simply the values that mainstream society wanted her to have. And so she's angry at society for making her feel and think this way for so many years. And of course, society hasn't changed. It's the speaker's mother, her attitude that has changed. So once you realize that you've been cheated by society and you still have to face society every day, wouldn't that make you angry? Okay, next question. Is Wild Geese a religious poem? Two groups took this question. Some said yes, some said no. Let's take a look. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. Okay, so yes, here we do have some religious imagery, right? Repenting, which means asking God for forgiveness. And even walking on your knees for 100 miles through the desert. This is also religious imagery. In the Old Testament, um, okay, again, how far back should I start telling this story? Okay, so the Jewish people believed that God had uh, set aside a very bountiful and fruitful land for them called the Promised Land, and that God would lead them there so that they would no longer have to obey another race of people. They could have their own land and have their own society. So, in order to get there, they had to pass through the desert, right? And it took a while. So, some people started doubting God. And especially when their leader Moses went on top of Mount Sinai to receive the 10 Commandments from God. That also took a while. It's not like he went up and came back down the same day. It took a few days. So when Moses came back down with the 10 Commandments, he saw that his people, the Jewish people, were now, a lot of them were now worshiping other gods. They're thinking, well, if our God can't help us, maybe another God can help us. And so Moses gets really mad. God gets really mad. Bad things happen to these people. And God, in order to punish them, makes them wander through the desert, get lost in the desert for 40 days as punishment. So the idea of wandering through the desert as a kind of suffering is also a very Christian, or I guess we should call it Judeo Christian idea or image. But here the poem is saying you don't have to. You don't have to be good. You don't have to ask God for forgiveness. You don't have to suffer like this. And this is why one of the groups said this is not a religious poem. But there's still a lot of poem left. So let's keep going. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Okay, interesting. So the first three are about like making your body suffer so that your spirit can be forgiven. But here it says all you have to do is let your animal side, not your spirit, but your physical body, love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I'll tell you mine. Despair means loss of hope. It also means loss of faith. So if you no longer believe, the poem is saying, that's fine. Let's share your loss of faith with me, and I'll share mine with you. And in sharing with each other, we also form a bond. We become connected. We also have a kind of communion or a holy union. This is fascinating because it's using religious imagery and situations, but the word choices tell us that it doesn't have to be about religion. Despair, you don't have to be good, animal body. But it's talking about these things in a very religious way. So, where is the poem going? Meanwhile, the world goes on. Again, meanwhile. So, as we struggle with our loss of faith, as we try to understand why we don't have to ask for God's forgiveness, why we don't have to suffer, as we keep struggling with these ideas, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the dear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, so the mountains and the rivers. So now we have large imagery of nature. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination. calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things. Okay, I'll talk about all of this nature imagery later, but notice what's happening here. Meanwhile, the wild geese are heading home. No matter how lonely you are, lonely here probably because you don't feel like there is any place on earth that is truly your home. Okay, I think I got the causation backwards. 因果是有点相反. Uh, when you don't feel like any place on earth is your true home, then of course you would feel very lonely wherever you are. And the idea of home can also be religious. For Christians, right? They believe that when they die, they go to heaven, and so heaven is their true spiritual home. So the idea that geese are heading home, but you are profoundly lonely because now that you no longer believe, you feel like you have lost your one true home. It's a contrast, right? Look at the geese flying in the sky. They are not worried about faith. They're not worried about suffering, and they know where their home is. It's you who is worried about all of this stuff that feel lonely. But for you, the poem says, the world offers itself to your imagination. It calls to you like the wild geese. The world, the way that the world relates to you is just like the way the world relates to the geese. It gives the geese a home. And so nature, the world, can give you a home also. It is harsh and exciting. Harsh because it is not the heaven you thought you had. But it's exciting because it's something new. It's not, the opposite of heaven is hell. It's not hell. It's something else. It's something new. And over again, they announced your place in the family of things. So you may have lost a heavenly home, but you have gained a family of things in this world. So the non-religious reading of this poem is, okay, so you lost your faith, but look at the wide world out there for you. Even if you don't believe, the world is still there waiting, and you can find a new home among this wide world. The religious reading of this poem is that Mary Oliver is a Catholic, and according to the Catholic faith, nature was created by God, and therefore nature is a reflection of God, and therefore nature is holy. So when the poem says you can find a nature will give you a second home, it's just another way of saying God will give you a second home. Even if it's not in heaven, you can still have uh, the love and mercy of God in this life. So back to the original question, is this a religious poem? No and yes. It is both. It depends on how you look at it. Okay, question 4. Is the return a love poem? One group took this question. Um, you can tell that this poem was not taken from our textbook. I chose it specifically because I thought it was a really interesting and good poem to talk about. So this is, of course, related to the story of Theseus killing the Minotaur that I talked about last week. Very briefly, the Minotaur is in the middle. It's a monster with the upper body of a bull and the lower body of a man, and for various reasons, it has been put in the middle of a maze that uh, nobody knows how to get through the maze. Theseus, our speaker, has been sent to kill the Minotaur, and so he has to find a way to kill the monster and then get back out of the maze. Before he goes in, the daughter of the local king falls in love with him. And so she says, here, hold this white string. and I will hold the other end and stand outside of the maze. So when you find the monster and you kill it, you can just follow the string back out and we'll meet again. So the poem begins, "The deed took all my heart. Killing the Minotaur took everything I had." Notice the past tense, took. So the poem begins right after he kills the monster. "I did not think of you, not till the thing was done." It took all his heart, right? There is no room in his heart to think of anything else, including the addressee. Who is he talking to? We're going to find out very soon. "I put my sword away, and then no more the cold and perfect fury ran along my narrow bones." And here it's talking about the mental state that you need to kill somebody with a sword. Because the Minotaur is not like a cow that's locked up, right? The Minotaur is a monster that fights back. So it's talking about the kind of courage and mindset and fury that you need to willingly enter into battle with a monster and like face down death right in front of you. A cold and perfect fury. Why fury? Why anger? Anger is one of the few emotions that fill your mind. When you're angry, when you're really angry, you do stuff that you would never do otherwise. You lose rational control. It's a force that impels you to do things no matter the consequences. And that's exactly what you need if you're walking into battle. That's why if you like watch, war movies, before major battles, the generals will always try to hype up the soldiers, will try to make them feel like the enemies are evil, and that they try to make the soldiers feel like they're defending their home, basically to rile up a kind of anger, so that they won't think about the fact that they're going to kill people and that they themselves might die. So cold and perfect fury. And then no more the black and dripping corridors hold anywhere the shape that I had come to slay. So after I finished, there was no more purpose for me here. These hallways of the maze, nowhere in this maze was there another thing that I had to kill. I was done. My mission was over. Dripping corridors. This is interesting. So the maze, have you guys ever walked a hedge maze? 那个树丛迷宫，你们有体验过吗？Do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. So you might think they're just hedges, 就是树丛而已啊，有什么好可怕的? The point is they are higher than you are. You don't know where you are. You don't have a map. You don't know where you're going. And that's the kind of maze that Theseus is stuck in. The walls are so high, we're going to see later, it's like a cave. It's blocking out the sun. It's dark, and therefore it's probably wet. So dripping corridors. So, okay, I'm done. I killed the dude. Then, for the first time, I saw in the cave's belly the dark and clotted webs. These are spider webs. The green and sucking pools, pools of stagnant water where like lichen and algae have grown. The rank and crumbling walls. Rank means dirty and stinky. The maze of passages. So only after I finished my mission did I look around and notice my surroundings. And I thought then of the far earth, of the spring sun and the slow wind and a young girl. And I looked then at the white thread. So only when he looks around and he realizes how um, um, unwelcoming his surroundings are does he think about life outside of the maze. He thinks about the earth far away from here. He thinks about the sun that he cannot see. He thinks about the wind that he cannot feel inside the maze. And then he remembers a young girl holding a white thread waiting for him outside. So he looks down at his hands and he sees that white thread. Hunting the Minotaur, I was no common man and had no need of love. Again, the mindset you need to go enter into battle. You're not a man, you're half a god. You have to have that confidence in order to be willing to face death. So, of course, if you're more than a regular man, you wouldn't think about things like love and marriage. I trailed the shining thread behind me for a vow and did not think of you. So the only reason I uh, didn't let go of the string is because I promised you I would keep it. But I didn't think about it more than that. It was just a promise. It lay there like a sign, coiled on the bull's great hoof. And back into the world, half blind with weariness, I touched the thread and wept. Oh, it was frail as air. It was a single thread, right? It's a very thin connection to the outside world. And I turned then with the white spool. The spool is the thing that you wrap the thread around. 中文叫什么？线轴之类的，就是那个你把线绑上去的那个东东。Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Okay. I turned then with the white spool. Through the cold rocks, through the black rocks, through the long webs, and the mist fell. When a mist falls, it means that the mist comes down. So the mist covers your vision. It becomes harder to see. And the mist fell, and the webs clung. So the spider webs are sticking to him. And the rocks tumbled, and the earth shook, and the thread held. So no matter the mist or the webs or the earthquake or whatever, the one string did not break. Now, was there an earthquake? I don't think there was an earthquake in the myth. This is exaggeration, right? No matter what happened, even if an earthquake happened, the string was still there. So the original question, is it a love poem? Well, we do have a man and a young woman. We do have this connection by a single thread. But it does seem like this thread is more a symbol of hope, right? Theseus is stuck in the maze. He wants to go back to his own life, and this thread is the only way out. So in fact, this stanza here, it connects all of the main ideas of the poem. It puts them all together. It tells us they all form a single symbol. The far earth, the spring sun, the slow wind. So nature, hope, a young girl, and a white thread. So nature, love, hope, escape. All of these are bound together. And another main theme of this poem is a complete change in mental state, right? Before Theseus kills the Minotaur, he's a warrior filled with fury, single-mindedly focused on his mission. But after he kills the Minotaur, suddenly he realizes he is not just a warrior. He's a man. He's a human, and he wants to live. So it's a change, a complete change in mental state, and that's also connected with the memory of the woman holding the string. So if it is a love poem, it could be a love poem, right? He wants to go back to her. But if it is a love poem, it's not just about romance. It's also about this like really deep and powerful, life-changing love, a relationship that changes the kind of person that you are, that gives you hope again throughout all of your struggles and challenges. So you could say that the woman is a symbol of hope, or you can say that the poem is about a profoundly life-changing love. I think either one is fine. So at least we can agree it's not like one of those regular uh, romantic, sentimental love poems. It's a much deeper kind of love. And of course, because Mary Oliver is Catholic, you can also say that it's about going back. It's about uh, going from the depths of despair and loss of faith and finding your way back to God, if you wanted to see it that way. Okay, and question 5, are the poems by Oliver feminist? Well, we have one last poem. I'm going to go through this very quickly. Poppies, 罂粟花. The poppies are swaying in the wind, bright dust, thin and lacy leaves. There isn't a place in this world that doesn't sooner or later drown in the indigos of darkness. But now, for a while, the roughage shines like a miracle as it floats above everything with its yellow hair. So yes, the world has darkness. But for now, look at these bright and beautiful flowers. Of course, nothing stops the cold, black, curved blade from hooking forward. So yes, why are the flowers here? Because they are planted here, because somebody will one day come and cut them down and sell them. So death is coming. Of course, loss is the great lesson. But also I say this, that light is an invitation to happiness. And that happiness, when it's done right, is a kind of holiness, palpable and redemptive. So yes, death will come for these flowers, but not today. Today, it's all bright and hopeful and happy. And here, again, religious, here is where true holiness is. It's something you can feel, palpable. Sorry, palpable. It's something that can save you. It's redemptive. Here, I am washed and washed in the river of earthly delight. And what are you going to do? What can you do about it, deep blue night? So even when I know that darkness will one day come, even when I know that death will one day come, here in this moment, it can't touch me because I'm surrounded by these bright and beautiful flowers. And this bright and beautiful field of flowers is happiness, is holiness. So again, if you want to talk about non-religious readings, then this is about how moments of happiness in life can protect you from the inevitable loss and death and darkness. If you want to talk about religion, it's about how even though life is filled with loss and death, your faith in God can keep you sane and keep you going. Okay, so we've talked about all 3 poems by Mary Oliver. Are they feminist? Poppies doesn't mention women, but it does talk about flowers, which is kind of feminine, right? Wild Geese also doesn't mention women, but the idea of religion in the first 3 lines is very masculine. The idea that you have to go through trials and challenges and suffering in order to win your entry to heaven. It's a very male thing to think. Whereas the rest of the poem is about sharing your feelings and enjoying nature, which comparatively is more feminine. And returning to a family, right? That's also quite feminine. And then the return, we actually do have a woman, and the woman is the source of the man's hope. So even though she's not the focus of the poem, she's not the main character, she's what keeps the main character sane and alive and surviving. So are these poems feminist? They do present the first 2 poems present a more feminine perspective on religion and hope, whereas the third poem presents a woman as a symbol of hope. It puts her in a higher position than the main character. So you could say that they present more positive and powerful perspectives from the feminine side. They aren't politically feminist, they're more poetically feminist, if that makes sense. It's not just about men, it's also about how uh, women, many women, uh, perceive the world in a different way. Okay, questions about these? Okay, so next week we're going to talk about Taylor Swift. I have chosen 5 songs and created a YouTube playlist. Where did I put it? Where did I put it? 我没有上传吗？ Okay, I'll post it on Moodle later today, but I created a Taylor Swift playlist of the 5 songs that we're going to cover. 4 of them are by Taylor Swift. One of them is by The National, which is the band that has Aaron Dessner, featuring Taylor Swift. So yes, it's also a Taylor Swift song. Um, I don't think I have to introduce Taylor Swift, right? Born December 13, 1989 in Wyomissing, Pennsylvania, grew up on a Christmas tree farm. Her father is a stockbroker worth $10 million. Her mother was a marketing executive. She moved to Nashville at age 14 with her family to pursue a singing career after she realized she loved telling stories. Before that, she was a small-time child actor in musical theater. She got to Nashville. She got a songwriter's discovery developing deal, but she left the major label because she wanted to sing and not just write songs. So at age 16, she signed with Big Machine Records, which was newly created by Scott Borchetta. At 17, she put out her 17, 16, 17. She put out her first record titled called Taylor Swift. It did not reach #1, but it did pretty well. Then when she was 19, she released Fearless, won Album of the Year at the Grammys. And then after that, roughly every 2 years, she released a new album. And each time she has broken sales records. And today, her only competitor is herself. So that's the introduction. But also her songwriting is famous not just because the music is good, but also because the use of language and lyrics and literary imagery and metaphors. And that's why we're going to talk about her in this class. 2 more things before I let you go. First of all, I have included a long list of author introductions. Of course, Taylor Swift is not part of the textbook, so I found a different thing to put here. And it is an analysis of how her songwriting has changed over the years using data, if you're interested in that. And then the other thing I want to say is that in the handout, the lyrics might look a little weird because I didn't just copy them off the internet. I rearranged the lines to fit the meter. 我按照音乐的格律跟节奏重新组合了，就是每一行的那个文字。So, it's supposed to be, if it's a 4/4 beat, right? Then every line is 4 beats, something like that. I chose 5 songs that you may not know. And I chose them not because they're good, but I didn't choose them because they're good. I chose them because they're literary. And so we can talk about them next week. Okay, that's it. Bye-bye.